How she was drawn. That's what drew me to the part. She was drawn by a master, Joan Didion, and then she was transformed into a movie heroine by Dee Reese, and those are two of the most brilliant women that you could ever hope to work with or interpret. And I just couldn't wait to say yes. I love. It's interesting to say I love how angry she is, but she's a woman dealing with a lot of emotions, and like we all are. And I think that she's decided to stop pretending like everything's okay.
Oh, I gained a lot. It really put into perspective how lucky I am. How so as deep and arduous sometimes as the topic and feel of this movie is, it's extremely liberating and uplifting by the end of this movie because it's a celebration. At the end of this movie, by the end of this movie, it should feel like a celebration of life. So I learned just how lucky I am to be born, to be here, to be present, to be healthy. And it also put a lot of different things into context, I've never really thought of the different nuances of mental health and how they manifest, I never thought about smiling depression. I never thought about different forms of depression in that way.
I learned what it must be like for a mother who has a child who has been in rehab 14 times. I mean, it was very, very, sobering, and it really made me feel, even though it's in my imagination, but the story is based on real people, how much people are dealing with in this country and around the world with this terrible crisis of addiction, of opioid addiction, and how difficult it is for families and for individuals, to overcome it and to get help.
Couldn't even tell you. I would say just energetically, it was a very light set. Aside from the fact that the content was really heavy, I think we were all there and genuinely liked each other. Keep in mind, Rodrigo, when there were 10-minute breaks to change the lighting, would make whoever wanted to do planks. And so there was a competition for who can hold the plank the longest. Glenn Close did win.
Wow.
So there were push-up competition. The whole set was a very lively, active, fun set. Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I think that the macro story of this family and this part of life that they have to deal with on a constant basis, it's not a story about fetishizing drugs or criminalizing them or shaming you about it. It's none of that. It's just a real life story of a mother-daughter based off of an article and their journey in those 4 days that the Eli, who wrote the article, was with them on. And so it's just depicting a very hard time in a family.
Well, I learned that she can drive a 1930s clutch stick shift, in heels, and that was a difficult challenge for me. Yeah, absolutely. It was a piece of advice that was given to me that I try to pass on as often as I can. It sounds so simple, but in the moment it can feel so complicated, and that is that you are the only you, and there's no other you. You're never in competition with anyone but yourself.
I just have to think about that. There was probably one every day, I should think. There was a lot of unexpected stuff. I mean, I tell you, it was interesting looking at two people who had existed and trying to get to the core of who they were. I mean, what I was responding to was Tom O'Connor's brilliant script, really incredible script, which was a fictionalized version of these two real people. But when we went, for example, to Moscow to cast the Russian actors, including Merab, who plays one of the main parts, Penkovsky, they see him as a traitor over there. They see him as a really bad guy. And in fact, when you look at the information and the story, he did some pretty incredible things. So it's just how do you get to the truth here? And we did a lot of talking and thinking about that while we were working on it. You have a responsibility to try and nail the history, but more importantly, you're trying to make a movie that is going to speak to people. So all of that throws up lots of challenges, interesting challenges, but loads of stuff.
A surprise was I saw footage with Penkovsky in it. I was shocked how stoic he is. You can say that in English. He's not touched by anything. It's his really last days of his life, in the trial when he's asked all these questions as a traitor in the Soviet Union. So I was seeing this footage again and again and again, and I was shocked how he was made out of iron. That's what the impression that leaves with. And I was wondering if it would be interesting for the audience to watch someone who is like an iron, 1.5 hours. So we tried to make him more human and more maybe vulnerable than he was maybe in real life.
It's kind of all of the above. I'm a big Jesse Armstrong fan. I'm a huge Will Ferrell, Julia Louis-Dreyfus fan. Anthony Bregman produced a bunch of the movies that are my favorite movies with Stephanie. And what drew me to it is I felt like it had a real point of view. I think a lot of movies, sometimes you'll see a movie and it's pleasant enough, but it doesn't seem to have much of a take on anything. And this, without being pedantic or dogmatic or anything, felt like it had a point of view, which I thought was refreshing and exciting.
So it's a remake of a Swedish film that was kind of shepherded for 5 years by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who's also the producer, and she kind of got in touch with me about being a part of the project a couple years ago. And yeah, it's a story for people who don't know the original. It's a family on a ski vacation in the Alps, trying to just have some vacation time to reconnect when they're hit by an avalanche at lunch, and the mother, played by Julia, goes to protect the family from what's impending doom, and the father grabs his cell phone and leaves, only to find out that it was a practice avalanche and they weren't actually in trouble, but it unlocks a series of issues for them that kind of taints the rest of the trip.
It's always a combination of things. The novel's real interesting. The role was good, and I'm a real sucker for a strong director, and Dee was on my radar, and when she asked me to do it, I was happy to jump in.